Okay, y'all, we're gonna talk about the drones really quick. Needs to be talked about. Certain things need to be explained. This is right up my alley. This is psyop stuff, and I love talking about psyop stuff. So here we go.
Someone called the cops on these links.
Now, everybody pretty much figures out by now that these are probably US government drones. Otherwise, we would be in DEFCON Delta right now. There would be F 16s flying all over the place, shooting these things down. There would be missile systems being put in place. We might even have martial law if this was going on. And it wouldn't get to this point anyway. And why would the enemy, unless they're trying to do a psyop, and also why wouldn't the enemy why would the enemy light these things up and make them so visible? Notice how these are in a very nice pattern. This is to get people's attention, obviously.
See, even the police, they're going crazy.
I wonder if the police are in on this. The police often get in at some level, usually at a higher level. They're in on these sorts of things. Never forget, people, that your local police, first of all, they will buckle to the feds in a heartbeat. They will sell out to the feds. You say the name Fed to these people, these most police, and they just cower in fear, right? And there's some that try to stand up to the police. That happens. There's exceptions to everything. But I wonder at what level are the police in on this, putting on a show as well? Probably not at the lowest levels of their awareness, but certainly upper to higher levels, there's got to be some sort of awareness of this.
The aliens are attacking.
The aliens are attacking. She was being sarcastic. That was like a kid. Even the kid knows that this is not. This is obviously not aliens, and certainly probably U.S. government. Even a little kid knows this. This is a theatrical performance right here, which is what all psyops really are at the end of the day. Psyops are theatrical performances. That's why they use screenwriters and Hollywood directors sometimes for these things. That's PR firms are all about putting on a show.
The chase. Oh my god, now cars they're starting to notice. Here comes another. Oh, fire truck.
Obviously, the police are in on it. So, and then the tweet says that these are going into the water. That's kind of a reference to many, I would say, just, marginally legitimate UFO videos that are unexplainable, where the UFOs go into the water. That's part of the psyop to instill fear in people. Even if they realize these are not aliens, just that thing alone will recall in their subconscious the alien ships that went into the water. I'm not sure they're going into the water. To me, it looks like they are going down to sea level and turning off, or going behind the horizon, maybe turning off the lights. Then they become essentially invisible because they're so far away. Obviously, they're not going to use bright lights like the US government. Whatever the primary purpose of these drone testing programs are, which I would imagine would be to get the technology up to speed with Russia and China's drone technology. The United States is behind in not just drone technology, but other technologies like hypersonic missile. And this is typical of overextended empires throughout history. It basically comes down to an economies of scale phenomenon. Just like a big company gets too big, it's no longer able to run efficiently because of the size of the company. The same thing happens with governments. or any institution that's run by people. Now, why do this? I mean, why do this? It's besides being a test of drone weapons or drone technology, it's a test of psychological warfare techniques. They are right now running a human experiment uh, on people in these areas up north, without consent, without consent. And let's see, when this has happened before. Here we have a I remember when this happened. Here we have an article from Vice News, which is an establishment, cookie cutter, MSM, very safe and cautious news site that would never let out the truth. They would never talk about something like this unless they were allowed to, or unless it was impossible to hide. Here we have the Canadian military got caught doing a psyop in, I think, Prince Edward Island or Newfoundland, in which they put loudspeakers out in the woods in I believe, a rural area, and the loudspeakers had wolf howling and wolf sounds coming out of it. And they even did a public service announcement. They even got a public service announcement on, I believe, local television that said there's wolves out in the woods. And people were just mostly confused. And I think that's why this didn't work, because people didn't really buy it. It was a poorly run, they're saying right here, incompetence. It was a poorly run psyop, and the Canadian government got caught red-handed. So these sorts of things are done all the time, regardless of whether they should be done or not. Has anybody been held accountable for this? Is anybody going to be held accountable for these sorts of experiments? Probably not. So why would they stop doing them? They'll put this data that they're gathering to use eventually. They're watching the population. Maybe that's part of what the police's role is, to report on what effects this is having on the population. And it will be used eventually for something. Why in this part of the country? Well, as we saw with COVID, people in these urban centers tend to be more prone to hysteria. They tend to be more prone to psychotic breaks and letting their delusions get away from them. And why is that? I could think of a few reasons, but I think the main reason, I had to do this video again because this is the main reason. People in urban centers are less self-reliant and more dependent upon local authorities. They're more dependent on government. So they're going to take on a more childlike attitude in reference to the government, in reference to the authorities. And so therefore, they're going to be more insecure and more prone to fear, and therefore more prone to hysteria, if that makes any sense. It's all about being less self-reliant, more dependent on outside sources, whereas people in rural areas are more self-reliant. And they also tend to be more on the sort of going along with this. People in the urban areas tend to be less connected with their inner selves, their spiritual selves, or whatever you want to call it, and more outwardly focused on the material and the shallow and the superficial. So those are two main reasons why they would target these populations. And we saw this during COVID, when people in these urban centers, especially New York and in the Northeast, went absolutely hysterical because they fell victim to the fear so much, and they begged the government to take away their civil and human rights. And many of them fell in line with the tyranny because they needed something to make them feel safe. So that's why they're doing this on this population, because this population and populations in most urban centers throughout the world really are going to be more prone to these sorts of psyops because they're more prone to hysteria. So primary objective of this phenomenon that the government is running may be to test drone technology. But secondary and very important objective is to run psyops on the local population without their consent and see what the effect is. There would be no reason for them to make them so visible, to put on these light shows. And as we know, it has to be the US government, because otherwise these would be getting shot out of the sky. So that is my video. I hope this helps people understand what's going on. And hopefully this helps some of these weak-minded urban liberals and helps them, keeps them from being from falling off the wagon and back into a psychotic episode like during COVID. I am out.